10 years of work, thousands of hours of overtime, and I was fired with just one email. My name is Daniel Carter. I'm 42 years old. I worked for 10 years as a field superintendent for a large construction company in Dallas, Texas called Westland Build Corp. I was on site before the sun came up in the morning and home in the middle of the night. I gave years of my life to my boss, Greg Harrison. I saw him as family, not just a manager. I even attended his son's birthday. I came to work on a Monday morning, but my card wouldn't open the entrance turnstile. My laptop was locked. "Greg would like to speak to you in private," the secretary said, averting her eyes. When I entered the conference room, Greg pushed the file in front of me with a cold face. "Daniel, we are in the process of reorganization. I'm afraid your position has been eliminated." He never said thank you. No goodbye, no explanation. It was as if we hadn't worked together for years. I found out later. The person he replaced me with was his sister's husband. A man who had nothing to do with construction, but was pulled up because he was family. At that moment, I felt like knocking Greg's desk over, grabbing the files in front of him and throwing them in his face. But I didn't. I just looked him in the eye and said in a calm voice, "I understand, Greg. I hope everything works out for you." But there was another voice echoing inside me. "This isn't over, now it's my turn." That day I wasn't fired. I was just moved. From the office desk to another assignment. And this time, my job was to drown Greg in the swamp he'd created with his own hands. The next day, I dressed and left the house as if I was going to work. But it wasn't an office. Libraries, archive centers, quiet meetings with former colleagues. Step by step, I began to build a silent dossier. The first sources came from inside. I met Greg's secretary in a cafe. As she handed me a flash drive from her purse, she simply said, "Enough is enough, things are rotten inside." In the files, fake consultancy invoices, salary payments to ghost employees who are not actually working, and a document, profit transfers without shareholder notification. Greg's emails, internal correspondence, PDF files, dates, numbers, names. It all started to come together. An old engineer friend of mine showed me a project that had been rejected at the time. It was shown as completed on paper, but not even a nail had been hammered in the field. The government grant had been transferred to another account. And again, Greg's digital signature was on everything. A few days later, I was contacted by someone from technical support. We met late at night in a quiet park. He had a hard disk with him. It was a system backup of Greg's computer. He handed it to me without speaking. He looked me in the eye and he just said, "We trust you, Dan." Back at my computer, I examined the hard disk. There were video calls, money transfer plans, even Greg's own recorded voice saying, "Those funds? I shifted them elsewhere, but this stays with me." My hand didn't shake when I heard that. I just started backing up more carefully. I sent the data on encrypted USBs to 3 different cities in the names of 3 different friends. Everything was recorded. I didn't leave even a margin for error. Then I consulted a legal counselor. When I put all the documents on the table, he just went silent. He looked at the files for a while, then he looked up and said, "Dan, if these documents are real, this is not just internal irregularities. This is a federal offense. It's only a matter of time before he goes to jail." The last step was to forward the documents to the authorities. But I did it not with a petition, but with a detailed 67-page report. It included timelines, signed statements, technical analysis, and video evidence. Everything was categorized. I folded them all one by one. I put this title on them: Greg Harrison, the man under the wheel he built. The moment the documents were delivered, I put my phone on airplane mode. I went out on the balcony, took a deep breath. I didn't say anything, because I knew the most dangerous war is the one won in silence. Months of silence were finally broken. I got a call from a secret number. A young woman was on the phone. Her voice was shaky, but I heard what she said clearly. "Mr. Carter, the case you started on Greg Harrison is under formal investigation. We ask you not to talk to the press and to be ready." After the phone went dead, I had a strange feeling. Was it revenge? Was it justice? Or was it the dissolution of a sense of worthlessness that had been building up inside me for years? 2 weeks later, 6:10 in the morning. The plaza where Greg works is dark. An SUV pulls up. Agents in FBI vests get out. They're carrying boxes of documents, laptop bags, and an arrest warrant. But Greg isn't there. The news comes 2 hours later. Greg fled to Panama on a private jet the day before, and that's when the hope in me fell to the ground. But only for a second. Because Greg wasn't going to be the only one to turn this story on its head. Mark, Greg's business partner of 12 years, refused to sign the obligations that were handed to him, because Greg had tried to pin all the corruption on him. Learning of this betrayal, Mark cooperated with the prosecutor's office. The documents he provided proved not only corruption, but also international money laundering. The extradition treaty between the two countries for financial crimes came into effect. 28 days later, at a resort in Panama, Greg was taken in handcuffs during a dinner party. Before his eyes, the lobster on his plate was getting cold, but this time, there was no plane to escape. By the time he was brought back to the States, the press had already gotten wind of it. Ex-chief financial officer accused of multi-million-dollar fraud in 3 separate government contracts. I still couldn't believe it when I watched the news. This silent war that had taken me years was now a headline. And finally, the day arrived. 9:27 in the morning, I was at the entrance of the federal courthouse. My lawyer was silent as he walked beside me, but he touched my shoulder and whispered, "Today it's not enough to be right, you have to tell it right." The courtroom was packed. The press, victims, former employees. Greg was still confident when he entered the hall, his tie straight, his hair combed, but I noticed something in the lines under his eyes. Fatigue. The trial lasted 5 days. 5 days of Greg's voice recordings, forged documents, secret correspondence. His ex-secretary took the witness stand and tearfully said, "Greg pressured me to forge a performance report on Dan." Inside, the air was heavy. Greg's lawyers objected, but they were helpless in the face of the evidence. And on the last day, I took the stand. I turned to the judge, put down my file, and started looking him in the eye. "Your Honor, I'm Dan Carter. I stand in this courtroom not only as someone who lost his job, who has lost his honor, his faith, and his trust in his friends. When Greg silenced me, he didn't just silence one person. He corrupted the morals of an entire company. Now he's being held accountable here. All I'm asking for is not a fair punishment, that people don't shut up anymore." There was not a sound in the hall. The judge closed the files and did not speak for a long time. Then he announced his verdict. The defendant, Gregory Harrison, is found guilty of fraud, forgery of official documents, embezzlement of public funds, and fraudulent disposition of employee benefits. He is sentenced to a total of 12 years in prison, $3.8 million in restitution, and a lifetime ban from public office. Greg's eyes welled up, but he still didn't cry. He was trying to look strong in his own way. But at that moment, the battle inside me was over. Justice had been served. I stood in the center of the hall as Greg walked out in handcuffs. The crowd was slowly dispersing, but I was still there. Because this wasn't just my story. It was a story that could happen to anyone watching. And what would you do? If a manager like Greg fired you unfairly, would you blow the whistle? Or would you wage war with patience and documentation? Tell us in the comments, because maybe the next story will be yours. And for more of these stories, don't forget to subscribe, because justice sometimes comes slowly, but when it comes, it leaves a mark.